Chance. Beginnings. The afternoon light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Julian Barrett's penthouse office, casting long shadows across his collection of modern art. At 42, Julian had amassed more wealth than he'd ever imagined, possible when he'd launched his first cybersecurity startup 15 years ago. Now, as CEO of Barrett Digital Solutions, his name appeared regularly in business magazines and technology forums. His company's innovative encryption methods had revolutionized data protection for healthcare systems worldwide. Yet for all his success, Julian's evenings remained predictably empty. He glanced at his watch, 7:30 p.m., and realized he had no reason to hurry home. His spacious downtown apartment would be just as he left it that morning, impeccably clean, perfectly styled, and utterly silent. "Mr. Barrett?" His assistant Olivia appeared at the doorway. "The board meeting has been confirmed for Wednesday at 10 a.m., and Ms. Rodriguez called about the charity gala next Saturday." Julian nodded, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "Thank you, Olivia. You should head home. It's getting late." "You should too, sir," she replied with the gentle reproach that came from 6 years of working together. "Your calendar is clear for the weekend." A clear calendar used to feel like freedom. Now it just underscored the emptiness that money couldn't fill. 6 years had passed since his divorce from Vanessa, a separation that had been as public as... It was painful. The tabloids had speculated endlessly about the reasons. His workaholic tendencies, her alleged infidelities. The truth was both simpler and more complicated. They had grown in different directions until they barely recognized the people they'd become. "I might stop by the office tomorrow," Julian said, knowing how pathetic it sounded. Saturdays at the office had become his refuge from the hollow echo of his apartment. Olivia frowned. "The Foster Foundation sent over those documents for review. Perhaps you could look at those at home. Their work with urban education initiatives seems right up your alley." Julian picked up the folder she'd placed on his desk. The Foster Foundation was one of several nonprofits he was considering for his company's annual charitable partnership. He'd established the program partly out of genuine philanthropy and partly as a PR move after a particularly brutal profile in Business Insider had painted him as the loneliest titan of tech. "Fine," he conceded, slipping the folder into his leather briefcase. "I'll review them tonight." After Olivia left, Julian stood at the window, watching the city lights flicker to life against the darkening sky. San Francisco stretched before him, a maze of possibilities and connections that somehow always left him on the outside looking in. His phone buzzed with a text from his younger brother Thomas. "Dinner next week? Eleanor's asking about her favorite uncle." Julian smiled. His 7-year-old niece was perhaps the only person who could reliably make him laugh these days. He quickly replied with a yes. Later, alone in his apartment, Julian poured himself 2 fingers of scotch and opened the Foster Foundation folder. He flipped through pages of mission statements and financial reports until he paused at a photograph. A woman with auburn hair stood surrounded by children holding books, her smile radiating, a warmth that seemed to leap off the page. According to the caption, she was Dr. Nora Foster, founder and executive director. Something about her expression, genuine, passionate, completely present, caught him off guard. In his world of calculated business moves and strategic partnerships, such unguarded joy was rare. Julian took a sip of his scotch and continued reading. The foundation operated literacy programs in underserved neighborhoods with impressive success rates. Their approach was innovative, combining traditional reading instruction with digital learning tools, an intersection of education and technology that aligned perfectly with his company's community outreach goals. Before he could talk himself out of it, Julian sent an email to his assistant. "Schedule a meeting with Dr. Foster next week. I'd like to discuss a potential partnership in person." He closed the folder and walked to the window of his apartment, glass in hand. The city twinkled below, full of stories he wasn't part of. For the first time in months, Julian felt a flicker, of curiosity about something beyond the next business quarter or product launch. It was probably nothing, just another corporate meeting, another tax-deductible donation. But as he finished his drink, he couldn't help returning to that photograph and wondering about the woman whose smile seemed to hold secrets to a happiness he'd long ago stopped pursuing. The Art of Connection Julian arrived 15 minutes early for his meeting with Dr. Foster, an uncharacteristic move for a man who typically timed his entrances to the second. The Foster Foundation occupied a renovated industrial building in a transitioning neighborhood. The reception area featured colorful murals painted by local children and bookshelves overflowing with dog-eared classics and contemporary titles. "Mr. Barrett?" A young man with glasses approached. "I'm Wesley, Dr. Foster's assistant. She's just finishing up a reading session. Would you like to observe while you wait?" Before Julian could decline, Wesley led him down a hallway to a large room where about 20 children sat in a semicircle. At the center stood the woman from the photograph, though her presence in person was far more compelling. Dr. Nora Foster wore simple dark jeans and a forest green blouse, her auburn hair pulled back in a loose knot. She held up a book with illustrations, her voice animated as she read, pausing to ask questions that had the children eagerly raising their hands. "And what do you think happens next, Zach?" she asked a small boy who hadn't volunteered. The child hesitated, then whispered something Julian couldn't hear. "That's brilliant thinking," Nora responded with such genuine enthusiasm that the boy's face lit up. "Books are like puzzles sometimes. We use the clues to predict what might happen." Julian found himself smiling. In his world of high-stakes negotiations, sincere praise was as rare as humility. He watched as she finished the story and then had the children break into small groups with teen volunteers. Only then did she notice him standing in the doorway. "Mr. Barrett, I presume." She approached with an extended hand. "I'm Nora Foster. Thank you for your patience." Her handshake was firm, her green eyes direct and appraising. Up close, Julian noticed the light freckles across her nose and the laugh, lines that framed her eyes. She wasn't conventionally beautiful by the standards of his usual social circle, but there was something magnetic about her presence. "The wait was educational," he replied. "Impressive program you're running." "We try," she said, leading him to her office, a modest space with walls covered in children's artwork and bookshelves packed with educational texts. "Though I suspect you didn't come here for a lesson in children's literature." Julian set his briefcase on the floor beside a chair that had clearly seen better days. "My company is looking for our next charitable partnership. Your foundation's approach to literacy combines education and technology in ways that align with our corporate values." Nora settled behind her desk, raising an eyebrow. "Corporate values? Forgive me, Mr. Barrett, but I've heard that phrase used to justify everything from union busting to environmental negligence." Her directness caught him off guard. Most nonprofit directors he met with were so eager for funding they would have nodded enthusiastically at anything he said. "Fair point," he conceded. "Let me be more specific. Barrett Digital Solutions specializes in data security for healthcare systems. Education might seem tangential, but we believe digital literacy is fundamental to future participation in both healthcare management and the broader economy." Nora studied him for a moment, as if trying to determine if his words matched his intentions. "And what exactly would this partnership entail?" "Financial support, obviously," Julian explained, "but also technology resources, volunteer hours from our staff, and possibly curriculum development for your digital programs." "And what do you get in return? Besides the tax write-off and positive PR?" Julian almost laughed at her candor. "You don't pull punches, do you, Dr. Foster?" "Nora, please," she corrected. "And no, I don't. We've had corporate partners before who were more interested in photo ops than actual impact." "Julian, then," he offered in return. "And to answer your question, what we get is meaningful community engagement. My employees want to work for A company that contributes to something beyond profit margins. That translates to retention, which is ultimately good business. She nodded slowly. At least you're honest about the self-interest. Most people pretend it's pure altruism. I find pretense inefficient, Julian replied. For the first time, Nora smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her serious face. Well, that's refreshing. Most people in your position excel at pretense. Most people in my position didn't. Grow up in foster care before being adopted at 12, Julian said, surprising himself with the personal disclosure. He rarely discussed his childhood. Something shifted in Nora's expression. I didn't know that. It's not in the company biography, he acknowledged, but it's why educational access matters to me personally, not just as a corporate initiative. The conversation flowed more easily after that. Nora outlined the Foundation's programs and challenges, while Julian asked questions that revealed he'd done more research than most potential donors bothered with. An hour passed before either noticed. The time! I should let you get back to your actual work, Julian said, standing. This is my actual work, Nora corrected. Securing resources for our programs. Then I've taken enough of your time for one day, he amended. But I'd like to continue this discussion. Perhaps over dinner? The words surprised them both. Julian hadn't intended to make the invitation, and Nora clearly hadn't expected it. Is that how Barrett Digital Solutions typically conducts its philanthropic decisions? Over dinner? Her tone was skeptical, but there was a hint of amusement in her eyes. No, Julian admitted. That would be a personal invitation, separate from any business discussions. Nora considered him for a long moment. I make it a policy not to mix business with pleasure, Mr. Barrett. Julian, especially when the business involves the Foundation. I respect that, he said, feeling oddly disappointed. Then perhaps we could finalize the partnership details first and revisit the dinner question afterward? She laughed then, a warm, genuine sound. You're persistent. I've been called worse, he replied with a smile. I'll tell you what, Nora said, walking him to the door. Come to our family literacy night next Thursday. See the program in action. Meet some of the parents and children we serve. It'll give you a better sense of our work than any proposal could. I'll be there, Julian promised, surprised by how much he meant it. As he left the building, Julian realized the meeting had gone nothing like his usual business discussions. He had shared personal information, been challenged rather than flattered, and somehow ended up volunteering for a Thursday evening literacy event rather than securing a straightforward donation agreement. For the first time in years, Julian found himself looking forward to something that wasn't related to growing his company or his investment portfolio. He wasn't sure what to make of Nora Foster, a woman who seemed genuinely unimpressed by his wealth and position. But he was certain of one thing. He wanted to see her again. Shadows from yesterday. Over the next 2 months, Julian found himself increasingly involved with the Foster Foundation. What began as a corporate partnership evolved into a personal commitment. He attended not just one, but several family literacy nights, initially feeling awkward among the parents and children, but gradually finding his place. He discovered he had a talent for working with the more reserved children, perhaps because he recognized something of his younger self in their quiet watchfulness. The board of Barrett Digital Solutions had unanimously approved a substantial grant to the foundation, along with the donation of tablets loaded with educational software for the reading program. Julian had even convinced several of his senior engineers to volunteer as mentors for an after-school coding club Nora had wanted to launch. And somewhere between foundation meetings and literacy nights, Julian and Nora had begun seeing each other outside of work. Their first official date had been to a small jazz club, followed by dinner at an Ethiopian restaurant Nora loved. She had laughed at his uncertainty about eating with his hands, gently demonstrating how to tear the injera bread and scoop up the spiced lentils. The CEO of a tech empire defeated by bread, she'd teased. I prefer challenges I can solve with algorithms, he'd replied, enjoying her laughter more than he'd expected. Tonight, they were having dinner at Julian's apartment, their first truly private evening together. He had dismissed his usual personal chef and was cooking himself, a skill he'd developed during his bachelor years but rarely exercised anymore. The lasagna recipe had been his adoptive mother's, one of the few connections he maintained to his life before wealth. Julian was chopping basil when his phone rang. The screen displayed Barrett Digital Solutions, Security, which meant the call was being routed through his company's private system. Few people had access to that line. "Barrett," he answered, pressing the phone to his ear with his shoulder as he continued preparing the meal. "Mr. Barrett, this is Diane from Front Desk Security at corporate headquarters. I apologize for disturbing you after hours, but there's a woman here insisting on seeing you personally. She won't leave without speaking to you." Julian frowned. "Did she give a name?" "Yes, sir. Vanessa Lockwood. She says she's your ex-wife." The knife in Julian's hand stilled. He hadn't spoken to Vanessa in nearly 6 years, not since their divorce was finalized and she'd moved to London to pursue her fashion design career. "Did she say what this is regarding?" "No, sir. Only that it's urgent and personal." Julian glanced at the clock. Nora was due to arrive in less than an hour. "Tell Ms. Lockwood I'm unavailable this evening. She can contact my assistant on Monday to schedule a meeting if it's truly important." "I already suggested that, sir. She's quite insistent." Diane's professional tone couldn't quite mask her discomfort. "She says she'll go to the press if you refuse to see her tonight." Julian's jaw tightened. The threat was pure Vanessa, dramatic and effective. Whatever her reason for appearing after all this time, he couldn't risk a media circus, especially not with the company's new healthcare encryption system launching next quarter. "Fine. Tell her I'll be there in 30 minutes. He ended the call and stared at the half-prepared meal. Cursing under his breath, he quickly texted Nora to explain the unexpected work emergency, promising to make it up to her. Her reply came moments later. "Rain check accepted. Save me some of that famous lasagna you've been bragging about." Her easy understanding only increased his irritation with Vanessa's intrusion. He changed quickly from his casual clothes into a charcoal suit, armor for whatever confrontation awaited him. The drive to his corporate headquarters took 20 minutes in evening traffic. The modern glass building was largely empty at this hour, with only security and a few dedicated employees still present. Diane gave him an apologetic look as he strode through the lobby. "She's waiting in the executive conference room, sir." Julian nodded his thanks and took the private elevator to the top floor. With each ascending floor, he assembled his emotional defenses. Whatever Vanessa wanted, money, publicity, some kind of revenge, he would handle it with the same cool efficiency he brought to business crises. But nothing could have prepared him for what awaited in the conference room. Vanessa stood at the window, her silhouette as elegant as ever. 6 years had done little to change her. Still model thin, her dark hair now cut in a sophisticated bob. She turned as the door opened, her expression unreadable. "Julian, thank you for coming." Her voice carried the faint British accent she'd acquired during her years abroad. "You didn't leave me much choice," he replied coolly. "What's so urgent that it requires threats and midnight meetings?" Vanessa had the grace to look slightly ashamed. "I apologize for the theatrics, but I needed to see you in person, and I knew you would try to avoid me otherwise. Can you blame me? Our last conversation wasn't exactly cordial. In fact, their final exchange had involved lawyers and recriminations on both sides." "No, I don't blame you," she said quietly. "But this isn't about us." She reached for her handbag, on the conference table, removing a small silver picture frame. For a moment, she stared at whatever image it contained, then extended it toward Julian. "This is about her." Julian took the frame reluctantly. Inside was a photograph of a young girl, perhaps 4 or 5 years old, with dark curly hair and a gap-toothed smile. Something about her eyes, a particular shape, a familiar expression, caused a cold sensation to spread through his chest. "Her name is Sophia," Vanessa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's 5 years old, and she's your daughter." Julian's mind refused to process the words. "That's impossible. We were divorced 6 years ago." "We were separated 6 years ago," Vanessa corrected. "The divorce wasn't final until several months later. Remember that weekend in Napa? The closure we thought we needed?" Julian did remember. A last attempt to salvage something from the wreckage of their marriage. They had parted ways afterward, certain that ending things was the right decision. "Why are you telling me this now?" he demanded, still staring at the photograph. "Why keep her from me for 5 years?" Vanessa sank into one of the conference room chairs. "I didn't know I was pregnant when I left for London, when I found out. I was angry, Julian, angry at how our marriage ended, at your accusations, at everything. I convinced myself you wouldn't want to know, that you were too consumed with your company to care about a child." "That wasn't your decision to make," Julian said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You're right," she admitted. "It wasn't fair to you or to Sophia. I've realized that more and more as she's gotten older. She asks about her father. She deserves to know you." Julian placed the photograph on the table, needing distance from the small face that had instantly, irrevocably altered his world. So why now? After 5 years of silence, Vanessa looked down. "I'm getting married. Richard, my fiancé, he wants to adopt Sophia. But I couldn't let that happen without giving you the chance to be her father. It wouldn't be right." A bitter laugh escaped Julian. "How magnanimous of you. 5 years of her life gone, but at least now you can marry your British boyfriend with a clear conscience." "That's not fair," Vanessa protested. "Fair?" Julian's voice rose slightly. "Was it fair to keep my child a secret? To deprive her of a father? To rob me of watching her take her first steps, say her first words?" Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. "I made a terrible mistake. I know that. But I'm trying to fix it now." Julian paced the length of the conference room, trying to contain the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm his carefully constructed control. Where is she now? Sophia? The name felt foreign on his tongue, the name of his daughter, a person whose existence he'd been unaware of until minutes ago. "With my mother in London. We're staying at the Four Seasons downtown. We'll be here for 2 weeks." Vanessa hesitated. "I thought, if you wanted to meet her, we could arrange it. On your terms." Julian stopped pacing and faced his ex-wife. "I need time to process this." "Of course," she said quickly. "Here's my contact information." She slid a business card across the table. "I know this is a shock. Take whatever time you need. But please, Julian, don't punish Sophia for my mistakes." After Vanessa left, Julian remained in the conference room staring at the photograph of his daughter, a child with his eyes and Vanessa's curls, whose existence had been hidden from him for 5 years. A little girl who had never known her father. The reality of it crashed over him in waves. Anger at Vanessa's deception, grief for the years lost, fear of the unknown responsibility suddenly thrust upon him. But beneath it all ran a current of something unexpected, a fierce protective love for this small person who shared his blood. His phone buzzed with a text from Nora. "Hope everything's okay at work. Still have that rain check whenever you're free." Julian stared at the message, realizing with sudden clarity that his carefully reconstructed life had just been completely upended. He had been on the verge of something real with Nora, something honest and promising. Now, how could he tell her that his past had returned with a secret that changed everything? Truth revealed. The Four Seasons bar offered the perfect blend of privacy and background noise. Julian sat in a corner booth, nursing a glass of scotch he'd barely touched. The hotel was where Vanessa was staying with their daughter, though he wasn't ready to meet Sophia yet. First, he needed to untangle the knot of emotions that had kept him awake for the past 48 hours. His phone displayed 3 missed calls from Nora. He'd sent brief, vague texts explaining he was dealing with an unexpected personal matter, but he knew his sudden distance after months of growing closer would seem suspicious. Julian wasn't one to cancel plans or become unreachable, even for work emergencies. The truth was, he had no idea how to tell Nora about Sophia. How do you tell someone you're falling for that you've just discovered you're a father, that your ex-wife kept your child secret for 5 years, that your carefully ordered life had just imploded? Another, sir? A server appeared beside his table. Julian glanced at his untouched drink. No, thank you. As the server departed, Julian noticed Nora entering the bar. For a moment, he thought he was hallucinating, until she spotted him and walked directly to his table. This is a coincidence, he said, standing as she approached. Nora's expression was serious. Not exactly. Your assistant mentioned you had a meeting here when I called the office looking for you. I was worried. Julian gestured for her to sit. I'm sorry for being unavailable these past couple of days. Is it something with the foundation? Partnership? She asked, studying his face. Because if you're having second thoughts... No, he interrupted. It's nothing to do with the foundation. It's personal. Nora's eyes softened. Julian, we've been seeing each other for nearly 2 months. I know when something's wrong. Whatever it is, you can tell me. Julian looked at this woman who had somehow worked her way past his defenses, who challenged him, who made him laugh, who saw beyond his wealth to the person beneath. He owed her the truth, however complicated. My ex-wife is in town, he began. She arrived 2 nights ago with news that's changed everything. Nora tensed visibly. Is she ill? No, nothing like that. Julian took a deep breath. She told me I have a daughter. A 5-year-old daughter I never knew existed. Nora's eyes widened. For several seconds she said nothing, processing his words. How is that possible? Julian explained about the weekend in Napa, Vanessa's move to London, her decision to keep the pregnancy secret. As he spoke, the reality of the situation settled more firmly on his shoulders. She has my eyes, he said quietly. In the photograph. I could see it immediately. Have you met her yet? Nora asked. Julian shook his head. Not yet. I don't even know what I am. Angry, shocked, terrified. All perfectly reasonable reactions, Nora said. She reached across the table and placed her hand over his. What's her name? Sophia. Just saying it aloud made his daughter more real. Sophia Barrett Lockwood. She gave her your name, Nora. Observed. As a middle name, Julian clarified. But yes, Vanessa says she always intended to tell me eventually that she wants me to be part of Sophia's life now. And what do you want? The question hung between them. Julian had been so consumed with the shock of discovery, with anger toward Vanessa, that he'd barely allowed himself to consider what he actually wanted. I want to know my daughter, he said finally, the truth of it settling in his chest. I want to be her father, whatever that means now. But I have no idea how to do that. I know nothing about children, let alone how to parent a 5-year-old who's never met me. Nora squeezed his hand. Children are resilient. And 5 is young enough that you can build a relationship without the weight of too much history. There's more, Julian continued. Vanessa is engaged. Her fiancé wants to adopt Sophia. That's partly why she's here, to give me the chance to claim my rights as Sophia's father before they proceed. What rights do you want to claim? Julian ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration Nora had come to recognize. I don't know. Shared custody? Visitation? How does that even work with her living in London and me here? Do I uproot my entire life? Ask them to move back to the States? Those are decisions you don't have to make tonight, Nora said gently. Take some time. Meet Sophia first. See how you connect before making life-altering plans. Her practicality grounded him, as it often did. You're right. One step at a time. A silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Finally, Nora voiced what must have been foremost in her mind. Where does this leave us, Julian? He looked at her. This remarkable woman who had awakened parts of him he thought long dead. I don't know, he admitted. Everything is up in the air right now. My life, my priorities, they're all shifting under my feet. It would be unfair to make promises I'm not sure I can keep. Nora nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. I appreciate your honesty, and I understand this changes things. I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to step back, Julian said, the words painful but necessary. This situation is complicated enough without dragging you into it. Is that what you want? She asked directly. For me to step back? Julian met her gaze. No, but I also don't want to hurt you. Whatever happens with Sophia, my life is about to become very complicated. Julian, Nora said with a small smile, I run a nonprofit foundation in an underfunded sector. I navigate bureaucracy, balance budgets with too many zeros missing, and wrangle volunteers with conflicting schedules. I know complicated. This is different. Yes, it is, she agreed. This is your child. This matters more than anything else could right now. I understand that, but it doesn't mean you have to face it alone. Julian felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm not walking away because things got difficult. That's not who I am. Nora's green eyes held his steadily. I care about you, Julian. That doesn't change because circumstances have. For the first time in days, Julian felt a glimmer of hope. I don't deserve you. Probably not, she teased, the tension between them easing slightly. But fortunately for you, I don't operate on a merit system. Julian actually laughed then, a brief, surprised sound. Thank you. For understanding. For being here. So, Nora said, her tone becoming practical again. When are you going to meet Sophia? Vanessa suggested tomorrow afternoon, at a playground near the hotel. Somewhere public, but not too overwhelming. Julian hesitated. Would you come with me? Not to meet Sophia yet. That should be just us at first, but to be nearby. I could use the moral support. The request surprised them both. Julian Barrett, who prided himself on self-sufficiency, was asking for help. Nora smiled. Of course, I'll be there. As they sat together in the quiet bar, Julian realized that whatever happened next, however his relationship with his daughter unfolded, he didn't have to navigate it alone. He had found in Nora something he hadn't expected, a partner who stood firm when the ground shifted, who offered support without judgment, who saw his vulnerability as strength rather than weakness. Tomorrow he would meet his daughter for the first time. The thought filled him with equal parts terror and anticipation. But tonight, with Nora's hand still resting on his, Julian allowed himself to believe that somehow they would find a way forward through this unexpected chapter of his life. Julian arrived at the playground 15 minutes early, his heart hammering against his ribs. He spotted Nora on a bench across the park, offering a reassuring smile before turning her attention to a book, present but giving him space. Her quiet support steadied him. When Vanessa appeared at the playground entrance holding the hand of a small girl in a purple dress, time seemed to slow. Sophia's dark curls bounced as she walked, her eyes, unmistakably his eyes, wide with curiosity. Remember what we talked about? Vanessa knelt beside their daughter. This is the special friend Mommy wanted you to meet. Julian approached carefully and crouched to Sophia's eye level, his throat tight with emotion. Hello, Sophia, he managed, his voice gentler than he'd ever heard it. My name is Julian. The little girl regarded him solemnly for a moment before, offering a shy smile. Do you like dinosaurs? I have a stegosaurus in my backpack. Julian felt something crack open inside his chest. A space he hadn't known existed suddenly filling with light. "I do like dinosaurs," he replied seriously. "Stegosaurus is an excellent choice." Sophia reached into her small backpack and produced a worn plastic dinosaur. "His name is Spike, because of the plates on his back." "That makes perfect sense," Julian said, accepting the dinosaur when she held it out to him. "Thank you for introducing us." "You can hold him for a while," Sophia said generously, "if you're careful." "I promise to be very careful," Julian replied, the plastic toy suddenly the most precious object he'd ever held. Vanessa stepped back, giving them space as Sophia led Julian to the sandbox to show him how Spike liked to make footprints. They built a simple sand castle together, and Julian found himself laughing at Sophia's serious instructions on proper moat construction. Across the playground, Nora watched discreetly, her heart full at the sight of this powerful man completely, captivated by a small girl with his eyes and a plastic dinosaur. Whatever complications lay ahead, this moment, this first connection between father and daughter, was pure and perfect in its simplicity. An hour passed in what felt like minutes. When Vanessa gently announced it was time to go, Julian felt a pang of loss he hadn't expected. "Can Julian come see us tomorrow?" Sophia asked her mother, surprising them both. Vanessa looked at Julian questioningly. He nodded, unable to speak, past the lump in his throat. "Yes, sweetheart," Vanessa told their daughter. "I think that can be arranged." As they prepared to leave, Sophia tugged at Julian's hand. "You can keep Spike until tomorrow, so you don't forget to come back." Julian carefully pocketed the dinosaur. "I won't forget," he promised. Not ever. Watching them walk away, Julian felt irrevocably changed. He had entered the playground as a successful businessman with a complicated past. He was leaving as something far more significant, a father with a future to build.